The Eternal Pursuit of Youth. Clara adjusted her plunging neckline as she walked up the stone path to Mrs. Lang's house. The mansion loomed against the evening sky, its Gothic silhouette framed by bare, twisted trees. She shivered, clutching her coat tighter, but it wasn't just the crisp autumn air. It was something about this place. Mrs. Lang, Clara's voice coach, opened the door before Clara could knock. Her blonde hair cascaded in soft waves, and her pale skin seemed to glow in the dim porch light. She wore a flowing silk robe over what appeared to be a sheer negligee, her curvaceous figure a modern echo of Jane Mansfield. "Come in, Clara," she purred, her crimson lips curling into a smile. The interior was luxurious, but strangely cold, as if the house itself rejected warmth. Clara's breath fogged in the air. She followed Mrs. Lang into the parlor, where an old grand piano stood beneath a massive portrait of her younger self. "Shall we begin?" Mrs. Lang asked, her voice smooth and commanding. For the next hour, Clara focused on her breathing exercises, repeating scales and vocal techniques under her teacher's watchful eye. But she couldn't ignore the chill that seeped into her bones, or the way Mrs. Lang's robe occasionally shifted, revealing glimpses of the transparent lace beneath. When their session ended, Clara gathered her things. "Thank you, Mrs. Lang. I'll let myself out," she said. Mrs. Lang nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good night, my dear." Clara walked toward the front door, but she paused by a mirror in the hall to touch up her makeup. She dabbed at her lipstick, her mind still racing with thoughts of her enigmatic teacher. In the reflection, something caught her eye. Mrs. Lang entered the living room and approached an ornate sarcophagus set against the far wall, which Clara had assumed was purely decorative. Clara watched, frozen, as Mrs. Lang pressed a hidden latch. The sarcophagus creaked open, revealing a velvet-lined interior. Without hesitation, Mrs. Lang slipped off her robe, leaving her in the sheer lingerie, and climbed inside. She lay down, folding her arms across her chest, her face serene. The lid closed slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force, sealing her within. Clara's hand trembled, smudging her lipstick. The realization struck her like a cold wind. Mrs. Lang's obsession with youth wasn't just skin-deep. She lived in this icy house, slept in that tomb, to preserve herself, to cheat time. Clara backed away, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She left the house quickly, the cold air outside feeling almost warm in comparison. As she walked into the night, Clara glanced back once. The house stood silent and dark, a mausoleum of secrets. And inside, Mrs. Lang dreamed her eternal youthful dreams.